That's good. How are you? Got it.
Get the wives now.
Our next item in this dinner is a presentation to our commanding officer, Colonel Milton Johnson.
Without saying, that is really a work of art.
Now, I'd like to point out that this airplane was painted by one of the members of the 674th Bomb Squadron.
Give his name.
Give his name.
You're going to get it in just a second here. The picture has the Jap airplane that the colonel shot down from a bomber, and he shot down a Japanese fighter. So this painting has the Jap flag on his airplane.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Now, the painting was painted by, I said, a member of the 674th Bomb Squadron, Joe Nadello.
See what talent. He's missed his calling.
Yeah.
Oh, that is beautiful. Words just can't express it. I've got something to put in my will now. Thank you so much.
Joe Nadella, the Colonel has requested a photograph of you and him together and the painting. Please, if you would, step up here. Bob, have you got your camera available? Could you take a picture of the Colonel and Joe Nadella? By the way, after they get through taking the pictures, I forgot to mention when we brought this thing out that Joe Nadella painted this thing for the Colonel, but he donated it in the name of the entire group.
probably some people have heard what I said, but I would like for the people that took the picture here, if they will, to give me the negative or a print of it, if you will, please. I didn't bring a camera with me, I'm sorry.
This time, we're going to give the mic back to Colonel Johnson, who has something that I think needs to be said.
This may be a little redundant, but in this case of redundancy, I think it is well deserved. I also want to commend our good friend Matt here and his lovely wife for what they have done to put this on. And I also want to thank all you fellas that came down here. I know it was a great effort, and I want to thank you ladies for coming with them. I've had the pleasure of getting better acquainted, and it's been a real pleasure. I just feel so comfortable with you guys. I went over to Korea and fought another year and a half in the war with the 3rd Bomb. They happened to be a 3rd Bomb wing. They got promoted a little bit over there. And they flew the old Douglas 26 over in Korea for a year and a half in a full combat tour. But my heart is with you guys, I'll tell you. It's been a real pleasure to be with you, and I sure hope that we can get together again as we have planned, and God willing, it'll come off, I'm sure. I want to tell you a little war story without getting too much airplane stuff into it, especially A-20s. It concerns excuse me, I've got a horrible cold or something in my throat. I like to read biographies and autobiographies, and I think biographies might be a little more honest than autobiographies, but I read them anyway. I have read a lot of them about various people, including Arm & Hammer and a fellow from the Philippines named Carlos P. Romulo. I'm sure that a lot of you have heard of him. He was on the staff of General MacArthur when the Japanese hit the Philippines, and they hit just almost simultaneously there as they did when they bombed Pearl Harbor. And in short order, MacArthur and his staff and all of our military and the Filipino military were pushed down into that little peninsula, Bataan. I'm sure most of you gentlemen have seen it from the air. And there's a little airstrip down there called Marvellis, and it ran down to the water near Corregidor. And it wasn't very far, excuse me, over to Corregidor from Bataan. And things were getting real rough there, and it looked like Bataan was going to fall soon. And MacArthur had left word to Skinny Wainwright to be sure to get Carlos P. Romulo off of Corregidor, because every day the Japanese broadcast on the air that they were going to get Romulo and kill him. I don't know if they're going to eat him or not, but they were going to kill him. They ate a lot of our prisoners, and that's another story. But Romulo either wrote a book or somebody wrote a biography of him. I don't know if it's an autobiography. It could have been, but I read this maybe 20 years ago. I don't want to offend any Texans when I tell this, but Romulo was educated in our country, and he was a brilliant person. I'm going to tell you about how he got off of Bataan in a minute. And I read in this book that he came over to the U.S. on some occasion, and he was a speaker at a banquet such as this. And after he got through speaking, he was milling with the crowd of these Texans. And some big Texan sauntered up to him and he said, "Mr. Romulo, you being such a little guy, how do you feel among all of us big old Texans?" And he looked up at him, he said, "Son, I feel just like a dime among nickels." But I'll tell you how he got off of Corregidor. He stayed over there until Bataan was, they predicted, would fall this night coming up. And I happened to become a friend of a colonel named Roland J. Barnick. We both got in the ROTC program back in 1946 and went out to universities and taught ROTC. I went to University of North Dakota and he went to school in Colorado. But Barnick was on Bataan there. He was a second lieutenant pilot. There was a Navy ensign there that was a pilot. And they were trying to put a little seaplane together that would fly. They could get pieces and parts, and apparently the Navy traditionally throw everything in the water and deep six it. But they would go out at night on a barge and fish for these little airplanes that the Navy had thrown in the water, and they'd get up pieces, and they got enough pieces to make an airplane out of it. And it was really pressing them to get this thing ready to go before the Japanese took Bataan, and they wanted to get Carlos P. Romulo off of Corregidor. And they worked, and fortunately they got the little thing together, but they couldn't get it in the propeller to change pitch. It was stuck in high pitch, which meant that it was like starting a car out in high. You couldn't develop RPM enough to get a real good bite and traction, you know, to develop the thrust they needed to get off. And everything was corroded and rusty, but they got this little thing together, and they got the word for someone to go over and get Romulo off of Corregidor and get him over there because they had to get off that night. They figured that Japs would take the place that night. So they got all loaded, and they drew straws to see which of the pilots would fly that little plane out of there. And old Barnick won, and he got to be the pilot to take Romulo off there. And they thundered down this little old Marvella Strip, and everybody was shooting at them, friends and enemy alike, because they wasn't supposed to be in the airplane around there, and everybody thought this airplane was fair game, and they were shooting at them. And they finally got off, and barely got off, and they couldn't gain any altitude. They flew real low for a while, and they burned out enough fuel that they could get a little bit of altitude, and went down to one of the southern islands. And sure enough, Bataan fell that night, and Romulo was saved. That's a war story for you from World War II.